while we wait, I'm just going to put up that email.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Guys, anyone who would like to help with venue searching, they think they have a venue in mind, they think you'd like us to come to your small community or gathering, can you send me an email with some information, not just like, hi Mary, I want to do that, but tell me what you're thinking. Work with me there, to event at divinetruth.com.
You want to have, to get a reply, you're going to have done a fair bit of work yourself.
Yes. This, if you want to help, you must help, not just get the addiction met that I...
will serve you.
Yes, that I will do the work and you can say that you helped. Putting it very bluntly.
That happens a lot, I must say.
It's event. That's why I've written it up. It's not, it's the singular, event.
Event, yep. G'day.
All right.
You'll find one thing about Jesus is he's economical. He doesn't say an S unless he has to.
In the singular, please. Now, whoever's holding the mic, I can just hear it bumping against something, so just be mindful of that. Yeah.
Yep. So,
I think it's Cindy and Kevin, isn't it? It just might have bumped against something.
Yeah. Okay. All right. My bro, how are you, Luther?
Pleased to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure.
A quick call.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you from what you were doing.
Always at your service.
Thank you. Yeah, I just would like the audience to understand what it's like, over the time you've been in the spirit world, you've helped a lot of ministers and a lot of people in authority in religion to make progress. And perhaps you could explain to the audience what it's like, firstly, for the minister when they first arrive, and then what they've had to work through, and what you generally find, how difficult or easy it is to help them work through those things.
It depends a lot on the condition of them. Usually it's men, although now there's women in these positions, which is a joy for me. I've had a hand in hopefully helping some of that happen. Well, I have. I should be
you've
modest.
influenced your own religion, haven't the Lutheran religion, into having more women ministers.
Yes, it brought me great joy, that achievement, although of course it was dependent on the hearts and wills of others, but I enjoyed the process of influencing that to come about. So it depends a lot on the condition of the soul of the individual when they're on earth, and what motivated them to take up that position. So some people, I find, have come to that position really because they're grappling with their own faith. And that's something that perhaps not many people think about, but a lot of people take up that position because they find they have unanswered questions that draw them more and more into investigation, and they don't necessarily find answers, but they find themselves taking up this position at times to give themselves a sense of comfort or faith that doesn't actually exist. So when those people pass into the spirit life, there's often quite a lot of fear, confusion, but actually not a lot of necessarily desire for power, as you mentioned. I heard you mention that. But there is often a lot of feeling of rigidity, and wanting a certain thing to be true. And so then there is the time for a lot of education from myself and other people in a similar role as myself, to help the person to really come to grips with their initial lack of faith, their initial feeling of fear about the future, which has caused them to enter that field. Then, of course, there are people who do enjoy the sense of power over others, and they are often drawn because they like to feel an influence. They often see themselves as persons, people who enjoy other people, but because they're not dealing with their particular sins within themselves, this becomes tainted and they become driven really to influence groups, as you've said. These people find it very difficult when they enter the spirit life. I find that they often spend many, many years, sometimes up to 100 years, feeling rage, or not feeling rage, enraged, and also trying to return to the earth, trying to exert the same power over others. And they often find that they almost lose faith in a God entirely in that process. So they almost feel opposed to God, and some of them never actually connect with God again. They choose a path that is not with God at all. Of course, then there's other people who do have a feeling of service. I would have said that I fell somewhere within the first category and the latter category in my life on earth. Yes. I was troubled by the question of God. I was troubled by the question of faith. But also I did have a feeling of a desire to serve. Of course, I was corrupted by my own sin as well, which is what caused the troubles when I entered, in what I did on earth, but also when I entered the spirit life. But those people who are drawn to service, of course, they still become entrenched in the idea that their belief system is right and correct, and often the only correct belief. If they are, at times now on earth, we see what people like to think of themselves as a bit more liberal, a liberal Christian, where they feel like, well, perhaps it's not down to this letter of the law, but perhaps we're all on to something, but there is still a parameter in which these faiths must exist, and there is a very strong arrogance and belief that that is the correct and true way.
So that, maybe if I can give an example of that so the audience understands what you mean. When it comes to the Christian faith, the liberal Christians now allow homosexuals to come to their church, and so things that were normally condemned by the books of the Bible, that are supposedly written by Paul, they would normally now be more liberal about that. But when it comes to fundamental doctrine, such as Christ died for you, died for your sins, Jesus is God, and a number of other fundamental doctrines, hellfire and other doctrines potentially, they're very immovable on still.
That's right. And even if they are interdenominationally tolerant, they still feel and this is probably the biggest belief that I find these people struggle with, is the idea that sacrifice should be rewarded, and that love is sacrifice, and that there should be an absolution of sin and pain through service. And because of that belief, a lot of those people struggle very, very long and hard as well when they enter the spirit life.
Because they fundamentally believe that because they served, they should be absolved of their own sin. Because they sacrificed their life in service. And
it's very difficult for them to come to terms with the fact that they, in fact, have more pain because they drove themselves in this service in an impure way, in a way to alleviate their guilt and to feel that they are worthy people. Now, of course, I've only just spoken there very briefly about three common motivations and how impactful they are when people pass. But I haven't touched on the the point that you mentioned earlier, which is about the influence each of these types of ministers, for the sake of brevity, if I say that, they've all influenced a great number of people, not only through their direct preaching, but also through the position that they've held in a community, and also they've reinforced the idea that their position grants them authority, and that there are positions which have more like a nearness to God, a closer alignment with God's authority than anybody else.
Where you get a hierarchy in the church structure,
yes,
which then indicates that those people in the hierarchy, higher in the hierarchy, are closer to God. That's the implication. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of suffering for these people. They often are grappling with both their personal sin, their loss of faith in the doctrine that they upheld, a lot of anger in that loss of faith. Many of them are unwilling to lose faith, if we say that in terms of a grief or a letting go of the faith. They often remain very angry and become angry at God, but still demanding that their belief system and their faith should have
been the truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
So their personal sin that caused them to enter the profession, if we could call it that, enter the role. Then their feelings of rage and disillusionment about the fact that what they believed has not come to pass, and often that becomes directed at God, and as I mentioned, some never ever re-establish any desire for God in a pure sense, or establish a desire for God in a pure sense. And then along with that, they're having to feel the compensation of having influenced so many people in corrupt ideas and doctrines about God.
Yeah.
And so it is quite a challenging road for my brothers and sisters. But of course, one that I have a lot of time and compassion for, knowing that I was a part of perpetuating the very thing that they are also perpetuating.
Yeah. Hence your knowledge about what they're going to have to deal with, because you've been through it yourself. Yeah, so, as we were saying to Michael just earlier, with his question about why don't ministers come along, you can sort of see, if you analyse all of those things that Luther just said, you can see that, there's a lot to have to deal with before they're going to come along, really. Yeah.
And, brother, even in there, I didn't directly address their conception of yourself.
Correct.
There is a belief amongst all types of ministers that even those who don't believe you are God, that you should be godlike, or really...
Not a person.
Not a person.
Yeah.
And you should have magical powers.
Yeah.
And while they may not say it as such, that is really the desire within most all Christians, and certainly most all ministers of each faith. And so that becomes very challenging, but also an easy way for them to dismiss you, which is their preference.
Yeah, particularly on earth. In the spirit world, a bit more difficult for them to dismiss, but on earth it's quite easy, isn't it? Yeah.
But all of them must grapple with because of course in the spirit world you can visit them once they have a desire, and you can display your spirit body, and at times that assists them to listen a little more to your colleagues, such as myself, who are trying to help them at times. But every Christian who holds this belief, and certainly every minister, must work through the sinful desire that you are magical, which is, so at times when they see you in your spirit body, they might become more open to the truth about God or the truth about their sin, but they still harbour this desire to see you as someone separate, magical, godlike, or God. And undoing that particular sin, as you are aware, there are many personal motivations, not really to do with your identity per se, but the desire that there are magical solutions. And I know you've spoken about this in your weekend just gone. This desire to have a magical solution to pain, to have an all-knowing, doing all removing of any personal sin by an individual. And this fundamental part of the Christian faith is actually the biggest corruption that I observe now, the biggest corruption in individual Christians relating to God directly.
Yeah.
It is sort of the canker sore in the faith.
Yeah. And just so sometimes the audience don't believe my comments very much. So I'm just going to ask you, how many people have you observed, or do you now know, are imitating me as spirits in the spirit world?
Well, that's something that's easy enough for most people to do in the first sphere, of course. Beyond the first sphere, nobody wants to do that anymore. But there are millions. There's millions. And it's not something, some people take it up as a job, if we can, so if I say that flippantly, but, as a longing and a full-time desire, that they become recognised as such by people on earth. But then, as you know, many times spirits attempt to talk to people on earth, and people don't listen. And people don't listen, and people don't listen, and then they realise, I'll just say that I'm Jesus. And then people start to listen.
They'll listen.
And so,
they do.
Yeah, people can just decide to do that. People with a lot of sin can just decide to do that one Monday afternoon, not as an overall burning desire that they're going to do it for all of their time, but just, I would really like to get this message through, so I'm just going to say I'm Jesus.
Yeah.
And I'll do it for the good of the person. Then they'll listen. Yeah. And of course, all of these are very sinful reasonings that only occur in the first sphere.
Yeah. Now, you've also had some experience with other religious faiths and helping, obviously, the religious leaders of those faiths.
Well, they grapple with many of the exact same issues that ministers or people in positions of authority in Christian faiths grapple with.
In terms of the Jesus issue, how do they grapple with that?
Well, they have much less issue with Jesus. They don't. They have more issues with their own prophets or their own spirits who masquerade as gods within their faiths. But they don't have. They have many of the same sins that drive the belief in Christianity in a magical being who will alleviate sin and suffering through their sacrifice.
Yeah.
And so this is where I and others like me, regardless of our religious background on earth, can be helpful to those who've dedicated their lives to whatever spiritual or religious pursuit on earth. We're able to help because the sins are essentially very similar.
Now, just for the sake of the audience to understand sometimes the darkness that surrounds the condition of arrival, oftentimes, could we compare them with other people who arrive in different conditions who have no religious background or knowledge at all, in terms of how they arrive versus how these ministers arrive?
Well, of course, it's a person who has engaged in a ministry based on sin and driven by their own sin, with a lot of error contained in what they teach, arrive in a very dark place. Far darker than some of the other people that you've spoken to just recently. Arnaud in Canada, and even some of the other just regular people who went to church. They often arrive in a brighter condition than those who have been teaching. So many ministers and people within religious organisations on earth in authority pass into the lower hells, really. They have And many times these people as well have had many pangs of conscience
during their earth
life, which they have overridden for the sake of image. They're wanting to appear a certain way to others, wanting to appear confident and full of faith, when in fact they had none, or they were quite frightened that their beliefs were wrong. Many of them have had pangs about the influence that they see people seeking their counsel without question, and they have moments where they realise, I'm giving advice not based on my knowledge, but on a doctrine that I myself even either have questions about, or I wish to exploit this person through their belief in this doctrine. So all of these things are very weighty sins, and they apply to any teacher, actually, of anything, who has those same corrupt motivations when they're advising people or directing people.
Yeah. All right. Do any of you want to ask further questions? So maybe if we start with Oz, just behind there.
Thank you, Jesus, Mary, and Luther, for this great opportunity. The question that I have you met Pope Francis, who passed this April? And are you able to speak about his condition?
Yeah, he's still not yet in a place where he wants to engage with change and education. He has passed in quite a dark condition, mainly due to his desire to uphold a very corrupted position on the planet. And he had knowledge of the level of corruption that exists within the Vatican and within the operations of the Church. And he did very little to correct that, when in fact he had a great deal of power to correct it. And so when we have a lot of opportunity and power to make a change, and we do very little, even if we do a small, many people view certain popes or certain people, they did this, they did this change.
At least but they did that one thing.
One thing, but God measures against the opportunity and inklings and conscience that they had to make a much greater change. So God measures the effort versus the opportunity, if that makes sense. And so he's paying compensation for not having done more when he felt when he had the opportunity to do more. Also, he had quite a bit of personal arrogance, of course, in order to take up that position, and was in really quite a dark condition as compared to his peers of the same generation on earth, because he had engaged positions of power over others and taught false doctrine his entire life. But I'm sure that in time he will engage with the education. He's not someone who is going to fight it for centuries. Some popes fight it for centuries, but it may be a century before he's willing.
Thank you.
Of course, may I just add, with every pope who rises to power exists within a power structure that is quite dedicated to the control of the Pope's exercise of their power. So he exists within another power structure. He's perceived to have the most power, but there's a lot of other parties controlling the Pope's actions, or attempting to control the Pope's actions. So these people are very, very corrupt as well. It's not to diminish the corruption of the Pope, but also to identify that the powers surrounding a Pope and attempting to control the operations of the Church in this hierarchy are extremely dark. So anyone who rises to the top of that organisation has a great deal of awareness of that corruption and a great deal of opportunity to correct it, and none yet have taken it.
If we come down to Vijay here and then across to there.
Thank you so much for your time. I wanted to ask about service. specifically with respect to service as you now view it through your eyes as you've grown? Because before you embarked on your sin, your career of sin, there must have been parts of you that truly wanted to serve, and there are people I see who on earth claim they want to serve and get lost in their version of service,
Yes.
which sometimes darkens their soul condition when, So I thought if you could highlight a little bit about how true service works and what true service is.
Sure. On earth, obviously, the idea of service is greatly tainted by the sin that exists in the environment. And so many times when a person first feels, I'd like to serve, they're really driven by their desire to receive something from that service, so in an addictive way. But very often, as you say, there is perhaps the spark or the seed of something within them that sees, even if it's just sees the potential benefit. Some people have the intellectual idea, if everybody served more, things would go better. Life would improve. But it's not yet a heart feeling that I am willing to be the one who does that without reward. And so on earth, often what happens is people have that intellectual idea. I myself would count myself as one of them. But then they enter that field of service or that activity of service, and they're not willing to give up their desire to receive something in return. Now, for many people, it's even just a feeling in return, but for others, it's they want other parts of their life to be taken care of. So we see this a lot in religious ministry. A priest or a minister will have the idea, I will serve the congregation, but the church must take care of my living situation and pay my bills and provide me a car sometimes, and sometimes all my meals. And these kinds of things are the corruption of the feeling of service. The true service is the service that I believe I'm now engaged in. I'm fully responsible for myself, my own emotional condition, my spiritual beliefs. I have my relationship with God that guides my actions, but also from a physical point of view and a sexual point of view, I'm not reliant on the service that I give to others to reward me in any of those areas of my life. So that's in a very simple explanation what true service is about. Now that brings immense rewards. It's immense, but they're not the motive. The reward is not the motive for the service. And many people get very confused around the relationship between reward and service. Many people serve to gain the reward. What I have found that it is not until I develop the pure desire to serve for the sake of love, without any, and for the love of truth, without anything in return, that I gained the true reward. And that's a reward that is not reliant on others, and it's not depleting on others to receive that reward. Yeah.
So to that extent, I've always been curious about someone like Mother Teresa, for instance, who has obviously done something incredibly, different than what anybody on earth has, but living a selfless life to the extent that, that is accepted as a model of service or a gold standard of service. I wondered if you could address that.
Yeah, it's a great question, because in fact that's not self-responsible to serve to the point of self-denial. And my sister Teresa has created a model of service which is serving her denial of her sexual self, her denial of her physical care, and often to mask a feeling of hopelessness that she has about the state of the earth. So she's created something driven not through the desire to give a gift in a pure sense, but to give a gift in order to alleviate her deep sense of hopelessness, which originated in her childhood, which is a grief that when she feels through that, she will gain a pure understanding of service, and she will also begin to honour those parts of herself that God created for her own fulfilment and pleasure, physically, sexually and emotionally, which will mean actually that she is an example of service through love of self and love of others.
So while she was on earth, she wasn't the gold standard of service.
No, certainly not. And this is a corruption also of the concept of service on earth. And it's very important that people who wish to engage with service are very clear that they're not driven to serve externally in order to manage pain internally. This is something that's very rewarded on earth, and often it does create a lot of sinful motivation, a lot of energy can be exerted because the person is so dedicated to avoiding their internal pain that they find they have so much energy, but actually it's very depleting, and by the end of that person's life they become almost crippled because they're still carrying that deep pain. Yeah.
So where did Mother Teresa arrive in the spirit world? Because many of you believe she must have arrived in a very good state, right?
Yeah. Into the first sphere.
Yes.
Yeah. And not in the hells, but certainly she's being assisted to see that she does, that her condition cannot improve while she wishes to avoid her hopelessness. And so, sort of in the middle section of the first sphere, because some of her acts were rewarded, but they cannot be fully rewarded because she cannot receive the positive compensation because she has a lot of negative compensation for not only modelling an error-based lack of self-love, pure self-denial and sacrifice model of giving, but because she was so intent on avoiding her own hopelessness.
And I also wanted to ask, when you look back on your earth life, I'm sure in hindsight being 2020, there must have been moments that you felt God was talking to you that you didn't hear.
Oh, yes.
And
moments where I thought God was talking to me and it wasn't God.
That wasn't God, yes. So did you find yourself reflecting on an opportunity that was genuine, that you could have taken, that you didn't take?
Yes. I still reflect on those opportunities, but of course there's no pain in me about them now. But initially there was a great deal of pain where I realised that at times when I felt deeply passionate for God, that there were times when God did give me information about, for example, about emotion. I experienced emotion, and yet I taught that we shouldn't rely on emotion, we shouldn't listen to emotion, that we shouldn't, acknowledge emotion, that we should be stoic and strong, and these kind of multi-generational sins that existed within me, I didn't allow God to correct. The treatment of women also. God did try to communicate with me about those things, and I ignored those promptings. I judged them as my base sexual desires. My own sin coloured the receptivity I had to God's truth.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Heather, over here.
It's really an honor to be here in this setting with you today. Thank you.
I agree. It's an honor to speak with you, Heather.
I often wonder if can you tell us about some of your brothers and sisters who have gone through the process of the pain and getting rid of the error, and who are now, or are there some who are now trying to correct those things on earth, but why don't I hear about them? Is it just because we're not receptive to them? Are they available, and could you give us an example?
Sure. There are so many of my colleagues who are, there's teams, thousands and thousands of people who have been ministers and clergy people on the earth who are now trying to correct the situation, specifically with people who hold the same positions that they had, but also amongst whole congregations of people. The major limitation is sin. But to be more specific, there is usually, almost in 100% of cases, there is a dynamic which exists between a congregation or a group of people within a religious faith and their leaders. So they share a common desire, and some of those common desires are that there are magical solutions, that pain and joy should be shared experiences rather than individual experiences with God. The whole idea of group prayer reinforces that. There's an idea that family and community should come before other people. These are very, very common sins on the earth. There's also feelings about the fact that we should be granted security in our religious beliefs so that we don't have to encounter life's everyday problems. We don't have to grapple with them. We just turn to the faith to give us answers. There's no personal onus upon myself to work through the callings of my conscience and the pull of my sin. There's a desire to have an authority give the answer rather than to develop the personal will and the personal morality internally. There's also the feeling that sacrifice and duty should mean that an image should be enough for God, and that we should receive the benefits of God and God's love without actually being real and honest and being fully self-responsible. So you can see that all of those sins that almost all people in religious faiths, and certainly the people who lead those religious faiths, share in common, it creates an atmosphere that is very difficult for myself and others among me who share my desire to actually penetrate, to actually reach people. On the occasions that we do reach people, often those people are then excluded from those congregations or from those religious faiths. And then they experience that exclusion, and unless they are extremely humble and remain open to our inspiration, they often become disillusioned. They often turn against God altogether because they associate this feeling of inspiration that they had in that context, and then the response of the people around them, they associate that with God and religion. And so then they feel it must not be for me, or there's all this pain now for me. Unless they are very humble, it's very difficult for them to maintain that connection with myself or people like me who are trying to inspire them. And so, yes, there's too many to count a number, and of all faiths, I know you have connections with the Mormon faith. There are many people from within that faith, and of course, Mormon congregations are often very open to spirit ideas and inspiration as well. But again, there's always these divisions, and this is the issue of sin on the earth. And why myself and so many of us in the celestial heavens become excited when you have these conversations with us at these events is that you are now engaging in God's truth outside of a religion, outside of a conglomeration. And actually, while some of you feel lonely in this experience, it's actually these personal qualities of developing your own relationship with God and grappling with your personal problems and your personal sin and developing morality. These are very strong qualities. And to develop these on earth, you assist us then in this work.
Yes, thank you.
You don't want to ask any more, Helen? You're good. If we come down to Mandy and then over here across to down the front there.
Hi, Luther. Thank you. Would you, so those of us that have a strong Lutheran background, what do you see as some of the biggest issues that are kind of carried down through that?
Well, of course, there's a lot of injuries from the German culture, the Stoicism, the belief that depriving oneself makes oneself more holy or good, so doing without, sacrifice, or even with not having, how do you call it on earth now, like frills and bells and whistles, that somehow this makes you more morally better, morally superior. So the issues surrounding emotion, the issues surrounding self-love and self-care, and of course I'm not promoting all the bells and whistles, but more promoting the idea that a person takes good care of their physical self and equal care of themselves as the others around them. So often within the Lutheran injury set, if we call it that to use this terminology, or within the faith, there is a feeling that service should bring reward, self-sacrifice is a moral position, when in fact it is a denial of self-love. So these kinds of issues, I would say, they're coming from myself and something that I am working to rectify. Yeah. There's also, I believe there's good things as well that I've come to see over time, that there is more of a feeling of brotherly and sisterly care. It's just that it's not based in a true soul sense, but there is a feeling that we should care for others and be open to others. That is quite. It's a little stronger in the Lutheran faith than in some other faiths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, Luther. So I have like a bunch to say, but I kind of just wanted to say this first point.
Can we not say things, but rather question?
Yeah, that's what. All right.
Yep.
Would you share points about God's truth and like about divine truth to Christians, like even though you're flawed? Like for an example, like when I talk to Christian girls and like I tell them like, if men and women are equal, then like just a point of like telling them like if men and women are equal, then does that mean that if God sent a man to die on the cross, would he have also sent a woman? And like just like points like that of just trying to explain to Christian people like just stuff like that. But like the thing is that like I don't feel like I still look at porn, or like I realize I have really bad spiritual beliefs like towards women. So I'm like, is it still good for me to say those points that are like good for people to hear? Because like I feel like when girls hear, like, could you imagine if it was Mary on the cross, naked, hanging in front of people, like how girls would feel about that? And like I've never heard anybody talk about that. Like, and there's just so many other points that I have. So like I'm just wondering like.
The issue for yourself is, as you've just acknowledged, you have anger towards women.
Yeah.
So
right.
Any point you make with a woman, even if it's based on some good logic, what they are experiencing on a soul level is your anger.
Yeah.
So until you deal with that, then you must question your motivation for the conversation.
Yeah, go ahead.
And it's always going to be tainted by that.
Just stop for a moment because you want to argue. And just listen to what he's saying to you. Yeah.
So the anger is actually motivating that question. In the exact example that you gave,
yep.
There's anger and a desire for power over the woman and her spiritual beliefs, yep. Driving the questioning. Now that's very different to myself, who no longer has any desire for spiritual power over others, and particularly I don't have any injuries with women that would cause me to want power over them. Then my asking the same question would have a much different effect. And in fact, I would phrase it differently.
Yeah.
It's your anger that you must deal with. If you want to share God's truth, Remember that the truth is emotional. The truth always contains love. So until you have this feeling of brotherly love towards your sisters,
Not sexual love, but brotherly love.
yeah, and until you release your desire for power, which is actually driven by the rage you have with women, then the conversations you have will be quite damaging, not only to yourself, but to the women involved and to God's truth. So this is a principle that applies for everyone, regardless of
The subject matter
in relation to divine truth, to God's truth, let's call it.
So it would be good just to not share until I deal with that stuff?
It would be the very best thing to deal with that stuff.
Yeah, because at the moment they can determine, here's a guy trying to influence me, have power over me. They can feel all of that from you, while at the same time you're trying to say that we're equal.
Yeah, that's
And so now there's a hypocrisy between the thoughts you're trying to share and the emotions that they feel from you. So naturally, they're not going to respond very well to that.
And also, I emphasised this truth that you desire spiritual power over these women. Remember earlier, your brother Jesus was talking about how spiritual power is there's the most compensation for wanting this kind of power over others. And also it indicates that within yourself there is a deep level of anger. It's not to judge that anger, but rather to understand what is driving it.
Where it came from.
Where it came from.
And the effects of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Could I ask about that? Like, I feel like in order for me to even, maybe this is wrong, but I'm asking, but like for me to even get to that point of like realizing just like those points about Christianity, that there like at some level had to have been like some deep love about like people aren't understanding this, and like I want people to understand that. Is that the bad part?
May I correct you? It
Okay.
wasn't your love that caused you to consider those things.
Okay.
It was the love of spirit friends, spirit brothers around you and sisters.
For you.
Yeah.
For you, to help you to reflect upon what are logical points.
And that part was loving?
Well, that wasn't your love.
Or yeah, but just loving in general. Yeah.
Oh, no, there's no such thing as loving in general. There's
Right.
spirits who are being loving to you by sharing logical truths with you and causing you to ponder over them. Your desire to then share those truths with others at this stage is marked by your unloving behaviour rather than loving behaviour. Yeah.
And actually the very point they raised with you was in an effort also for you to start to delve into the areas where they see you have a lot of sin and healing to occur, which is around your relationships with women.
Yep. And it's interesting how in your question even, you did reflect upon, or you at least are aware, that you're still interested in porn, which obviously is indicative of the rage that you have towards women. And yet you're not aware that that's about the rage you have towards women. You think it's about sexual desire towards women rather than seeing it as rage towards women. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good thing to raise in that this is very educational for others, but it is I cannot stress to you enough that your question is driven by a misunderstanding about love, truth, and motivation. So you're not yet examining your motivations for your actions, and you're not yet viewing how God views what we do based on our motivation, our soul. And logic is always loving because it contains truth, but be very careful of believing you are logical while you still contain a lot of anger and sin.
That's where I'm like, I get really divided on, because I'm like, I know that this is logical and I know that that's right.
No, hang
but
on a sec.
No,
you
no.
only know it intellectually.
Yeah, okay.
So you're only intellectually logical, but you're certainly not emotionally logical.
It's not logical to
At all.
raise an issue with a woman supposedly to assist her with spiritual truth when you have a desire for spiritual power over her, for example.
Yeah.
That's not a logical action.
No. In fact, it's a destructive action that destroys your own condition even further. So it's definitely not a logical action for her, and it's also not one for you in terms of your own progress. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's very important to see how like if your motivation, so remember, you might hear a truth and you might intellectually sort of accept that truth, which is what you've done about this equality thing. You think you know that truth, but actually in your heart, when it comes to your sexuality, your emotions and your spiritual beliefs, you do not know that truth at all at this point. It's not in any of those areas. It's not in your beliefs, it's not in your emotions, it's not in your sexual behaviour yet. So you really do not know the truth of it yet. And until you grasp the truth of it in those aspects of your soul, your sexual development, your emotions and your beliefs, until you grasp it there, you are not really going to be able to share it with the proper motive.
And in fact, the sharing of that truth with you, which happened primarily intellectually from your loving spirit friends, was in an effort to assist you to feel where that truth is not within you as a truth, spiritually, sexually and emotionally yet. So it wasn't given to you so that you could then act in the sin which is opposing it with other women. It was given
and browbeat women. It wasn't given so you can browbeat women with it.
It was given to you in a loving gesture to help you to become more sensitive to where you were out of harmony with it internally.
Yep.
I didn't realize that at all.
No.
So, yeah.
No. And this is where, like, a person who's humble would see that.
Yeah.
But a person who lacks humility doesn't see these things. What they do instead is they go, oh, now I know this truth. I'm going to tell it to everybody I hear. And you've got a very forceful personality in your error. And so now you're not even waiting for them to exercise a will to know. You're forcing it upon them as well, for your own purposes, actually, emotionally and sexually, rather than seeing that you're actually doing something that's completely illogical emotionally and sexually. What it's doing is repelling women from you, ironically, which it naturally will do when we live in our sin. Yeah. So I see a lot of young men doing this. Like they think they're hearing divine truth, they listen to it, they go, we're equal. Yes, I think I understand that now, but there's no shift in them emotionally or sexually or with their belief systems to actually understand it at a true level. And so then they start acting towards women in a manner that's quite abusive, actually, that's now pushing women beyond their will to know things, pushing them into trying to force them into knowing things, which is now out of harmony completely with love. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep. Just because I'm going to...
No more now.
Yeah.
I think that's enough now. Yep. If we come down to the front here. Yep. Thank you.
We'll take 2 more questions.
2 more questions and then it's time to... Yep.
Hi, Luther. For someone who is impacted greatly by the teachings of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., especially around nonviolence, I wonder if you could speak to the teachings about nonviolence that were in harmony with God's love and truth and the parts that may have been tainted by his own condition.
Well, obviously, nonviolence itself is very much in harmony with God's truth as a principle, but of course with every principle, for it to be truly embodied, it must exist within the soul of the person, not the intellect. So when a person is in a state of sin on earth, obviously there's a tainting of that non-violent principle regardless of who they are. But Martin Luther King Jr. benefited a great deal from just teaching non-violence on the planet. I think perhaps to go through his individual acts and the individual principles is a bit beyond our... Perhaps we can do that. I think he would like to come and do that with you at some point, to talk through the mistakes that he feels he made. But I can say that he did pass in a relatively good condition at the top of the first sphere due to his teaching.
Thank you so much.
And one more question. If we go to... Yes...
Yeah, he would definitely like to come and talk about that.
Hi, Luther. Two questions. I'll start with the first one is about how hard did you find to face all the unloving things you did on earth? Like, I would assume that would be a fairly difficult thing to do. The second question is, like, what is your life like in the celestial heavens? And if you could give any descriptions, just like really curious about that.
Oh gosh, well, that's they're not really small questions either, are they?
Not really, no.
Okay. Yes, facing my personal sin, the sin I engaged on earth, was difficult in that I had built an arrogance about my beliefs on earth, as most people in my position had. I had felt that I had affected a great deal of positive change on the earth. I had felt that I had reformed things. So I had quite a lot of investment in thinking that I was good and righteous. This was very difficult for me to face, that actually what I had done was not good and righteous, and that it had only further confused the issue of God on earth, and in fact that I had promoted the enslavement of people to perpetuating sin because I had promoted their lack of emotional connectivity and the disparity in the relationship between men and women in terms of their worth, that I had promoted another institution on the earth, or the formation of an institution. Of course, it wasn't fully formed when I had passed, but I had planted the seeds of that created further division amongst people. So all of these were some of my most major sins. There was also my personal detachment from emotion, my personal detachment from my soulmate. So there was quite a lot of entrenched sin within me. I had developed my will in the direction of these things. Some people on earth are more or less aimless. They face different challenges to what I faced. Because I had engaged my will in these ways that involved, as Jesus mentioned earlier, the spiritual beliefs of people on earth, there was quite a lot of compensation that I encountered immediately that I entered the spirit life.
And with gusto.
Yes, I'm quite an energetic person, and so I had done a lot.
You'll see.
Yes, I had done a lot. This energy serves me well now, but in my earth life, I had expended almost. I was barely idle for a moment in my whole earth life, and I believed that I had found the right way. I was quite in my mind about that, and so when I entered the spirit life, I encountered quite a lot of restriction to my action and my movement, which I found very frustrating and confronting because I was used to moving forward on whatever I was doing, and now I see that it was extremely loving, and I had enough. I can't call it morality, I can't call it ethics, I can't call it a good quality yet, but I had enough pause that within a relatively short amount of time, I could see that I was compensating for acts that I had done wrong. Many people in my position, as I mentioned earlier, maintain that state of arrogance for centuries and centuries and centuries, and while any person maintains their arrogance, it prevents their forward movement towards love and truth. So I had enough wherewithal, if we can call it, to realise relatively rapidly that the restriction I was under and the pain that I was in, which was quite extreme, physical and emotional pain that I was in, that it may have something to do with what I believed was true and righteous. The correction of that arrogance, the correction of the beliefs, the reconnection with myself emotionally, and the repentance, this happened over time. It wasn't immediate. I didn't face all of those things that I just mentioned all at once. But as you've heard in the stories of many others, I began to experience benefits, the more that I did. And once I established a relationship with God, a true relationship with God, I began repenting. As soon as I began my repentance process, I had the energy and I had the freedom again to begin serving, to correct what I had done. And that has driven almost all of my life right up until this very point. I no longer have any pain about the negative effects that I've had on the earth, but I spend almost 100% of my time still attempting to correct the harms that I've done on earth. I see that as a joy. I thank God continually for the opportunity that still exists for me to do that. I understand there's limitations, such as I described to Heather, but I have deep compassion for the people in the situations that they're in. I understand where they're coming from, and so I don't feel that it's a hardship to do what I do. It's a pleasure in many ways. I think that I know you would like...
He wants to hear about the pretty celestial heavens.
I know you would like that. I know that. I feel that from you, but I feel that is not the best way to answer you.
Can I just say, though... Can I just say, Luther exists in the pretty celestial heavens because of this attitude. Do you understand? Because of the attitude he has to correct and desire, the love that he has for people, trying to correct. You know, this is one of the main reasons why he's there. It's because, his version of love now corresponds with God. He's received enough of God's love for them to be in alignment. And because of that, he wants to live his life, firstly, in the correction of these things. Luther knows there is a limited opportunity for him to do this because the celestial heavens may close soon, and there may close that limited opportunity, may be a part of the closure of that celestial heavens, right? And if that becomes such, then he knows that he's got a limited time also to do these things.
Yeah. And we don't know when that might occur, but certainly I feel deeply motivated to continue what I do. And also it is something that brings me deep fulfillment. And I understand when you're on earth, there is such an emphasis on the physical environment. And I know you would like to hear about my home and the physical surroundings. But to be very clear with you, while I enjoy those things, they are not the primary source of my joy. They are features of my environment which I appreciate as gifts from God. God has made the provision for them to exist. But my deep joy and fulfillment comes from the work that I do. And I call it work, but it's not really work. It's my occupation, what occupies me.
His passion.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. And it might not always remain that his passion.
True.
Because as you change and as you grow, and also if the celestial heavens do close and the consequences of that closure, there might be other things. Of course, Luther is also developing other passions, right? But obviously this particular passion, particularly when you've become a person who's taught things and you see them going on earth and affecting a lot of people, it becomes your primary passion to correct that.
Mm-hmm. And I find the other passions that interest me or that I engage assist me in this passion or this occupation that I'm doing at the moment. Mm. The passion I have for music, I find music is a great way to connect with certain people in congregations, and they often open up in those moments, and I'm able to inspire certain people and ministers. And yeah, there's many more things I could say about that, but I think that it's important for Max, the questioner, to understand that the soul experience, the soul joy comes not from the external environment, the physical environment, but rather it creates the physical environment and it colours your experience of that environment in such a meaningful way that you no longer feel preoccupied by the physicality of things, but rather by the soul experience. Mm.
Your soul condition is such that the physical environment just reflects the condition. Not the environment makes you happy, but your condition makes the happy environment.
Yes. Yeah. And that I didn't seek to be where I am. I didn't obtain the situation I am because I was seeking a pretty environment. I was seeking to correct my sin, but also to love and to receive more truth. And my environment is a byproduct of that process.
And if Luther had been only motivated by the pretty environment, he probably would have stayed in the second sphere.
It's very pretty there.
Because he wouldn't have been aware that there's even more prettier environments and so forth. And by the time you get to a more pretty environment than what Earth is, you sort of, if that's your only motivation, you're going to stay there a long time.
Yeah.
You understand? So he can only reach the celestial heavens where the environment far exceeds the second sphere. But, you can only reach there by having the character development, the changes that happen within one's soul to create and be a part of that environment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So basically, you really wanted to know what you did wrong versus kind of denying everything and staying in hell for a long time.
Well, the law was showing me that I had done wrong. I did engage a lot of desire then to understand what that was. And I also developed not just the desire to repent, not to reduce the suffering as a result of my sin, but to bring joy and to bring happiness, to bring the potential for joy and happiness to people in a true sense. So not just to remove the error that I had created, but also to bring the truth that would bring happiness to people on earth. So both things I did.
Thank you.
So a lot less focused on himself and more focused on the sins and the effects of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that everyone should have the opportunity to experience the joy of a relationship with God.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think it's time for us to end there. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Good to talk to you again, brother. Does Gus, you got a bit of time for Gus to say a few things before we break for lunch?
Well, yes. Yes. But, all right, let's let him say what he wants to say.
Yeah.
Hang on, let's just... Thanks for having me back.
No worries, Gus. Yep.
Well, my friends, it was such a pleasure to speak with you. I'm still moved by the experience. I felt a little sheepish. I feel I got very excited about the opportunity to speak with you, and I perhaps wasn't willing to yield the floor to your teacher, Jesus. So I have many things that I wish to continue to share, and I hope that I will have those opportunities as well. But I didn't want to take away from really the person who's in more development than myself to teach you about these great things.
But I thought we were talking this morning a bit about the violence issue that exists here, particularly in the States, isn't it? Because it is quite a violent sort of society in comparison to many other societies. And whether you'd like to make any comments about that, because obviously that comes a lot again from leadership, doesn't it? And also from the individual injuries of the people in a country.
Yeah. One of the major things I wanted to say yesterday was just that the fear of violence, which I see in all of my descendants and almost everybody living in the United States, the fear of violence creates more violence every day. It creates the potentiality for more and more violence. And so one of the things that I wanted to mention yesterday and didn't didn't get to was really that for each individual to deal with their fear of violence, not act to avoid it, is going to be incredibly transformative for the nation. So is that, do you understand what I mean by that?
Yeah, so most people don't sort of understand on earth that that what drives violence is the fear of it. Because the more afraid you become of it, the more you have a tendency to value it as a decision-making thing.
Absolutely.
And so...
And you're prone to engage with it in order... the fear creates a faulty reasoning that I'm so afraid with violence, so I must engage violence to prevent violence.
Towards oneself.
Yes, which all of these things, of course, are not logical, but this is the sin that lives in the society.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think a lot of people are not seeing how much of a sin the fear of something is.
Yeah, that was the main point that I didn't make.
Yeah.
That sin exists in everybody here.
Yeah.
And it's not viewed as a sin.
No.
And even the people...
It's justified.
It's justified. And it does form a lot of the basis for how the society operates. Yeah. And so while the temptation is to blame leadership in that sense, from where I am now, I see that even the own violence that I engaged was based on a fear of violence. And I see that most people, there's an engine running in the nation, and the engine is saying, we're so afraid of violence, we're so afraid of violence. And it creates the leadership, and it creates the gathering of arms, the manufacture of arms. But that is the physical representation of what is existing on a soul basis.
Yeah. And then when an event happens, such as 9/11 or something like that, where the whole psyche of a nation becomes more terrified than ever before, now a lot of very bad decisions can be made very quickly because everybody's in that fear.
Yeah. Everybody is in that fear, and it just takes a hair trigger for it to ignite.
Yeah, and explode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very important for people to understand that fear is so easily manipulated.
Yeah.
And even people who don't engage in physical acts of violence are often very prone to emotional violence, based on the same fear.
Yep. So many of you, even in this audience, are very demanding emotionally, for example. Well, that's emotional violence. That's driven by your fears. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. The idea that the protection of family is also driven by the fear of violence. It's a strongly held value in this society, the protection of family. And yet, when I see its roots, when I see it existing, in almost every case, it comes from the fear of violence. And parents don't recognise how much they are instilling that in their children, that fear of violence. And not only the fear of violence, but the entitlement to avoid the fear of violence.
Yeah. So the creation of what is the illusion of safety is also about the fear of violence. Yeah.
It's incredibly unsafe to live in a fear of violence, to justify, to rationalise any fear is incredibly unsafe. But in particular, when it comes to personal safety and interpersonal violence, it becomes volatile.
Yeah.
And many people experience it, but they blame the wrong cause. And that's what I wanted to mention yesterday, is that there is a cause within almost every individual in the United States that creates this effect. And when the effect occurs, people blame anything other than this fear of violence, the rationalisation of violence to avoid the fear of violence.
Yeah.
And when a person's fear, particularly in the United States, but I know it's a global issue as well.
Yep.
When a person's fear is triggered, what they will rationalise in order to suppress or control or manage that fear is often violent. And this is what creates so much pain and suffering for the individual when they pass, but also in the actual society.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing to look at, what do I do when my fear is triggered?
Yeah.
In almost every case, you'll find that it is a form of violence.
Yeah. What do I do sexually? What do I do emotionally? What do I do physically? What do I do sensorially? What do I do spiritually?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you do things in every one of those areas.
What do I say? What do I buy? What do I do? How do I interact with others? What message do I tell myself? How do I vote? These are very practical things
Yep.
that people don't relate to the avoidance of, the rationalisation of fear. I want to call it the rationalisation of fear.
Yeah. Good-day. Well, thanks for
having
coming
me.
again. Very much. Lots of other things you'd like to say. But we need to probably move on with our discussion with you, which we'll have after we have some lunch. So thanks for his time.
And he wanted to thank you guys so much, and he felt so privileged yesterday, and he did feel a bit shucks last night, like, wow, I got carried away. It was the first time I got to do that, and then there was Jesus, and I was like trying to talk over Jesus.
It doesn't worry me much. It's great when we feel the enthusiasm of spirits, even in lower spheres, but the enthusiasm of them to teach the truth to you. Even a spirit in the third sphere has a lot of truth they've already imbibed, and they have such an enthusiastic desire to share it. The opportunity is often lacking.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And often it's really fresh for them because they're just dealing with these issues themselves.
Yeah.
They're very passionate about it. And
this is one reason why I like to talk with them with you, in front of you, because they've just gone through
what you have
some issues that they can see you need to go through. And when someone like Luther comes, he's gone through it, but it was hundreds and hundreds of years ago, you know what I mean? And for Luther, it's hard to even sometimes reflect back and even remember. Do you understand? Because you have such a busy life in the celestial world in particular, and everything happens much more rapidly there, around about 10,000 times more rapidly than here. So you fit about 10,000 times the amount of things you can do in the same space of time as what you can do it here. So to cast your mind back, if you imagine that, to cast your mind back to that event is quite difficult.
It's like when you asked about, what was your life like when you first entered, and he was like, okay, well, there was this stuff, but then it happened over time. And
rewind, trying to get and you're trying to get also, you almost forget the sequence of events sometimes even, because you're so removed from what happened to a large degree. And so much has happened since that it's very hard for you to go back. Obviously the record's there, but you've got to access it, and
you know what you learned, don't you? But it's not necessarily like blow by blow anymore. You have to really reconnect to it. Yeah.
Whereas you talk to somebody in this third sphere about what they did in the second sphere, it's still very raw and visceral for them. They've still got it only happened often what we'd call years ago here. It's only happened a few moments ago, really, in their life, and so they can recall it in a lot more detail generally, and a lot more. And also there's the other advantage is that because they're closer to your own condition, they can reflect upon many of your feelings that you're currently in. They're easier than, say, a celestial spirit might be able to. A celestial spirit can know your condition to a much greater degree, and therefore understand the real reasons for it, but which are far beyond the reasons that a third sphere spirit can even know. But often the third sphere spirit is just closer in terms of what you're going to have to face first. Yeah. Does that make sense? And so therefore it has more connection. So that's why sometimes it's great to have some of these friends come along and explain to you. So I think on this trip we've had a few that were even in the first or second sphere come along, and it's always been helpful for the audience because of that connection. Yeah. Okay, let's just check the time. So it's quarter to 2. We come back at 2:15. We just have a quick lunch now and come back at 2:15.